This was supposed to be a paddle day to Meisha Island. We had actually planned this way before the paddle, and there is Meisha Island. We could see it, we could feel it. Actually, the distance from Sucia to Meisha is 1 mile shorter than the paddle to Peitos, which we did the day before. But the outfitter insisted that the channel between Sucia and Meisha was way too rough for us to negotiate. So suddenly our paddle to Meisha became a hike to Shallow Bay from Fox Cove and back. When we arrived at Shallow Bay, one of the employees informed us that we were on the wrong trail. We were actually on a service road, and that if you wanted to walk around Shallow Bay, you would have to take the trail inside. So instead of doing that, we followed along the beach, and to the right was something special. No, it's not that tent. What's behind that tent is a ghost forest. At the start of the paddle, on the first day, when we paddled into Shallow Bay, we actually encountered this special phenomenon. If you look over my left shoulder, there's actually a funny looking forest. It looks like some of the trees died. In reality, what that is a ghost forest. Its origin is somewhat clouded, and it's about 100 years old. It's called a ghost forest because the trees had all died in that area. And there are some theories about how that happened. First of all, one of the theories was that there was a storm and all the salt water destroyed the trees in that small area. But there are other areas where the trees did not all die. So that theory was overlooked. Another explanation was that there was an earthquake that caused the land to drop, thereby saturating the land with salt water. More recently, there were discovered some irrigation canals that were dug by humans about 100 years ago, and that drained the wetlands and caused the trees to die. Whatever the cause of the ghost forest, the interesting thing is that most times people would miss this because they would take the trail that takes it directly to Shallow Bay and to the other features of Shallow Bay. So you almost have to take this wrong cut just to see it. As we walked along the sandy shore, we finally got to a kind of a coastal trail that allowed us to walk along the side or the bank and up to the higher levels. We eventually got to a point that we had to either go down to the rocky shore and hike, or we could continue up. Paul and I decided that we would take that route down by the rocky coast, and hopefully we would find the China caves when we took that route. So Paul and I walked along the shelf, and it was really slippery. So if you take this route, be careful. First of all, you got to take it at low tide, and then just kind of carefully walk and just be very careful about your step. Hidden behind these bushes were the famous or infamous China caves. China caves, located on the north side of Shallow Bay, are known for the history of smuggling various types of goods, mostly the smuggling of Chinese immigrants. During the 1850s, Chinese immigrated to mostly California as a result of the gold rush. But the gold rush didn't last forever. In 1870, the supply of gold ended.
You can't do it, I can't.
So what happened next was the railroads, and the Chinese immigrants were used to basically build the railroads. At that time, there was a thriving fisheries that was going on in the San Juan Islands. But there weren't enough workers to work the fisheries. The Chinese migrants were used for that because they were willing to work for a very, very low wage and do all of the jobs that most Americans didn't want to do. So in the San Juan Islands, the fisheries were thriving, and the Chinese migrants were using houses to house and work in these really, really grueling environments. While the Chinese were more than happy to leave their homeland, which was having a civil war, the Opium Wars, and the Boxer Rebellion, where some 40 million Chinese were killed, the opportunity in America was great. It was long, hard work. The conditions were terrible. The pay was very meager. But if you were a poor Chinese boy, it was generous. And if you could send that money back to China, to your family, that would be the greatest thing you could do for your family. Clearly, not everybody was pleased with the Chinese worker. Some felt the Chinese worker actually brought down wages in America, and they took jobs from Americans. So, in order to protect American jobs, Congress enacted the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. When the Chinese Exclusion Act took effect in 1882, 50% of the workers in the fish packing companies in the San Juan Islands were the Chinese worker. So what was a fish packing company supposed to do after the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1892? And they needed more workers because of growth or maybe replacement. The answer came with the human smugglers, the people who brought Chinese over through the use of human trafficking through the San Juan Islands. Smugglers used schooners like these to bring migrant workers from China through Victoria and through the San Juan Islands, and then some to Seattle. Some of the migrants paid $500 a head just to be able to come to America and to find work in the fish packing factories. Along with Chinese workers, the smugglers would carry opium and other illegal substances to America. The smugglers were treated like folk heroes, and even to this day, we have an image of smuggler King Kelly on the walls on Anacortes. Not all the smugglers were so benign as smuggler Kelly. Some were quite brutal. One smuggler with the same name as smuggler Kelly, known as Pig Iron Kelly, when approached by customs agents in the San Juan Islands, would wrap the Chinese migrants in burlap bags and throw them overboard. And of course, if you have any experience in the waters in San Juan Islands, it's cold, and you would last only about 5 minutes. Now, to be wrapped in a bag, you would also drown. So hopefully, if you were a Chinese migrant, you hope that you had a very, very merciful smuggler, perhaps like smuggler Kelly here, so that instead of wrapping you up in a burlap bag and throwing you overboard, that he may sail into shallow bay when the custom agents came and allow you to swim to shore and hide out in the China caves. Then when the coast is clear, continue on your journey to find work at the fish packing factories and the railroads in California. Ironically, it wasn't the brutal treatment of the Chinese migrant that ended the use for Chinese workers in fish packing factories in the San Juan Islands. It actually was technology that did that. In 1903, the invention of the iron chink was invented, and when it was introduced in the fish factories in the San Juan Islands, it caught on like wildfire. Now you had a machine that could do the work for 50 Chinese workers, and it never needed a break, never needed a place to eat or sleep, and it could work day and night. As soon as this machine and technology was adopted by the fish packing factories in Washington State, the Chinese migrant worker became obsolete. Interestingly, the influence of the Chinese in the San Juan Islands was actually minimal. If you look around, you really don't see too much influence by them, because most of the workers turned out to be itinerant single meals, that after the work was done, they either went back to China or they migrated south to California.